Big walleye.
Big hookup on the jigging Rap. I hope it's hooked really good. I hope it's hooked really good. Woo! Is an absolute stud.
Absolute
That
beast.
is a tank. Jig wrapping tank. Gorgeous. Heart's racing a little bit now. Fell victim to the jigging Rap right there. That makes any day look good right there. Well, what is up, fisher people? This video is all about how to catch big walleyes, and we're going to cover that by breaking down the best catches of this past season, see if we can learn some little tricks and patterns along the way, and put that all together for an overall how do you catch big walleyes type of video. Obviously, the number one and most important thing is the fact that you need to be fishing a lake that has big walleyes, because not all of them do, and not always in large numbers. So first of all, make sure you're fishing a lake that has big walleyes so you don't get disappointed, and then you at least have a chance. And then there's a lot of putting in the time, being in the right place at the right time, and then doing some of the little things right to get the bigger fish to bite. So speaking of right place, right time, there's probably no better time to catch the biggest walleye of your life than pre-spawn. At that time of the year, the bigger females, first of all, are as heavy as they're gonna be all year because they're full of eggs that they're about to lay. And they're feeding heavily, so you got a really good chance to catch them, and they're usually congregating in a lot of the popular spawning areas. So you have a better chance of being around a high number of big walleyes to catch. So this first fish, it was only 27.5 inches, but it was probably one of the heaviest fish I've ever caught in my life. And I caught it in April, pre-spawn on the Missouri River near Bismarck, North Dakota. And we happened to be on this particular spot. I was fishing with one of my other guide buddies, Kent Yancey, the Big Muddy. But we got into this particular spot where I caught this tank, he caught a 29.5 inch tank, and then we caught 2 or 3 other really nice, big fat pre-spawn walleyes. And what we were doing was, there was an underwater sandbar that topped out probably at 6 to 8 feet, depending on where the bar is, and it was right next to the river channel. So you got the deep water nearby, and then you got this sandbar, which is cutting the current. So these fish can sit right behind the sandbar where the current's cut and come up on top of there to feed and find the bait as it's kind of being pulled down over the sandbar with the current. So that's kind of the key to fishing those big fish that time of year, or any fish on the river period that time of year, is finding shallow sandbars near deep water with current breaks. That's the key to finding those fish, and side imaging is a huge key. You want to be able to see the fish on the side, because you're not going to be able to get right on top of those fish in 5, 6, 7, 8 feet of water, more than likely. Now the same thing can happen when you're fishing the lakes pre-spawn. It can be a great time to catch big fish. But then once the spawn happens, things get tough for a while the fish are spawning and then recuperating. So post-spawn, we spend a lot of time in the bays where fish are doing some of the spawning and where there's some warmer water, warming up more quickly than the rest of the water on the lake. The fish are looking for warm water. Warm water is the key in the spring, and you're gonna find all of the fish in some of the similar areas. Big walleyes, small walleyes, plus everything else, smallmouth bass, northern pike, everything. So there's not a lot of separation that you need. If you're on fish this time of year, shortly post-spawn, as the water temps are starting to climb, you got a good shot at getting big fish in the mix as well. So this particular fish, I was fishing with my buddy Randy, and got a pretty nice post-spawn female walleye up in the bay. This is a heavier fish. This is really good. Oh, it's a big walleye.
Big walleye.
Oh, yes! Yeah. That's the one we're after. You throw one of them in the mix, that makes any day look good right there. Oh, bye-bye.
He was gone.
Now what we were doing, fishing for those fish, was just pitching jigs and minnows. We were anywhere from 2 feet of water to 6 to 8 feet of water. We're looking at sand flats, and sand flats with a little bit of contour to them, but the fishing area that you're fishing is usually the flatter part. There can be a nice break on the outside of it. There can be a hump, an island, a sunken island, something like that, but we're fishing the shallow, flat part of things, typically where the wind's pushing in and where we can find the warmest water. And that's your key in the spring on the lake post-spawn, is finding that warmer water, which is usually where the wind is pushing into, which is also pushing a lot of the bait in there. Now, I haven't fished Devil's Lake a whole lot the last few years, but this year I did get a chance to go to Devil's Lake for a few days. I had one guiding trip there for a couple of days, and then Randy and I went there to pre-fish for that guiding trip and do a little bit of filming. And Devil's Lake, this was early June, first week of June, just in that warming up period, a lot of clear water. So it was the same scenario. We're looking for warmer water. We're looking for places where the wind is pushing in, because you want the wind to break up some of that sunlight that's coming in there. So the fish are very shallow. They're looking for warmer water. But the key there was we were catching tons of fish pitching plastic paddle tails, but they're all 14 to 18 inch fish for the most part. And then we decided to start pitching some crankbaits eventually, and that's when we started catching the bigger walleyes. This is different. Oh goodness. I don't think this is a pike. It's a big walleye. See it?
Oh my gosh.
See it? Nope, not yet. Get that out of the water.
You got it?
Oh. Oh, there we go. That's a Devil's Lake walleye. One more good look at that gorgeous Devil's Lake walleye. That might be the big fish bite approach, is to just cover water shallow and keep pitching instead of driving around graphing for big schools of fish. We were basically using bass fishing techniques, cruising wind-blown shorelines, warmer water temps that we could find, and throwing these crankbaits as if we're bass fishing, not even really looking at side imaging or graphing that much. As long as we're in the right area with warmer water, nice shallow bays, throwing these cranks, and the bigger fish, we're hitting the cranks more than the paddle tails. So the key to that fish was using a different presentation, a bigger bait, a more aggressive bait, and covering a lot of water once you're in the right areas. And that's how we pulled out some of the bigger fish. Sometimes in order to catch big fish, you have to wake up super early. But since I'm not fishing today, I'm gonna go back to sleep. Okay. 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 Holy cow. Now he's serious, isn't he? That's a good walleye. That's an over. Heart's racing a little bit now. Yes! Right there is everything this video was about right there. And we had to get up so early to do it. Up nice and shallow. And he's gonna release nice and easily. For this time of year, late August, early September, it is not easy to catch those fish. That made the whole morning worth it right there. So when you get into the dog days of summer, fish are gonna start pushing deep. And they can do this for a couple of different reasons. The walleyes may be more comfortable in that deeper, cooler water, but also walleyes wanna follow the bait. So when they're feeding, they'll go wherever they need to go to feed. But on Lake Sakakawea, for example, a big, deep reservoir system that has a lot of smelt, that has a lot of ciscos, those bait fish are cold water fish that want to be in the deep, cooler water. So you find a lot of walleyes in 40, 50, 60 feet of water, even deeper if you look for them when it gets to be late July and into August and that sort of thing. But one of the few times they will run up shallower is right at daybreak, right at sunrise. So as you can see for this fish, I got up super early, got on the lake right before the sun came up, hit my spot before the sun came up, and as hard as it can be to find those bigger fish in somewhat shallow water, I was able to find that fish in probably 22 feet of water, pitching and jigging around before they started pushing back deep in the middle of the day. So we were talking a lot about timing earlier, and timing, as you can see, seems to be a big theme of this video so far. Now, I had a particular day where I was fishing with no-deck angler Justin Vollmer. It was the end of September, and some days you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. We were fishing a spot which was a sunken island by the river channel with a super steep shelf. The fishable area goes anywhere from no feet of water, depending on how shallow the lake is and how low the water levels are, to like 35, 40 feet before it drops off a cliff down to 90, 100 foot of water, something like that. And we just happened to get on a spot that we barely moved. We did a little bit of jogging around, a little bit of trolling and ripping. We're ripping jigging wraps and just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the big thing that was the separator there too, not only that we were on those fish, but he caught more of the big ones than I did. We each caught a decent amount of fish. He caught the lion's share of the bigger ones because of the cadence that he was using with his jigging wrap. Now, as you've seen from some of my videos, I really like to crack jigging wraps. I like to get a lot of pop and a lot of movement on those things. That's usually what gets their attention. However, on this day in particular, for whatever reason, they wanted a little slower, more subtle movement to that bait, especially the bigger fish. So the bigger fish apparently just weren't in chase mode as much as the little ones. So my big cracks were getting more of the eater sized fish, you know, your 16, 18 inch fish. And he was doing a little bit of more of a kind of a slow lean into it and pull it sort of thing. He wasn't moving the bait as far or as fast. And he happened to catch, I think it was 6 fish over 20 inches. He had a 26 and change inch tank. He had numerous 23 inch fish. Might be a netter, he says. Jeez.
Catfish?
25 inch walleye. I can call your shot, that won't affect it. Big walleye. Big walleye!
That was good.
Gorgeous. So he definitely had the pattern for the bigger ones that day. So the key sometimes to get bigger fish rather than littler fish when you're in both of them is to change your presentation around not only the bait you're using, but how you're working it, your cadence, your method, your speed. And sometimes that can make a difference on the size of fish you're gonna wind up catching on that spot. Now, one other thing that can separate the big fish from the little fish, if you're fishing an area that has both, is just a bigger bait for bigger fish, especially when you get later in the season and you get close to fall. Because at that point, a lot of those bait fish are starting to grow and get larger, and it's the bigger fish that really want those bigger meals. A, because they're bigger and they need more to sustain themselves, but also they want a bigger bang for the buck. Little fish will chase a lot of things. Bigger fish have bite windows, but when they do, they want a big bang for their buck. They want to get a lot out of their meal. And what better big fish presentation than a creek chub? As a lot of people have seen in the last few years, creek chub rigging has won a lot of tournaments, especially on Lake Sakakawea. Even if they don't catch all of the fish, they definitely catch some of the fish and some of the big kicker fish. So I did a video with Jeff Ensminger, who also later in the season caught a near state record walleye for North Dakota. And we were pulling creek chubs, and they were definitely catching the bigger fish. I was working a jigging wrap, he was working a creek chub. The creek chubs were definitely catching the bigger fish.
By the time the tournament came.
It's just like cramming for a test. You got a bite?
Yeah, on the big chub.
On the big chub, uh-oh.
I'm gonna give it a little time. I put that one hook on.
We got a fish of some kind on it. I definitely think it's bigger.
It's bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not huge. Oh yeah, it is.
Ooh, wow! Yeah, it is.
So there.
Look at that horse.
He wasn't messing around. I'm gonna let him go.
And then a few days later, I also filmed another video with Mike Upgren and his son Ethan. They had some creek chubs that day, and the creek chubs definitely outshined everything else, period, whether it was for medium-sized fish or big fish. But it definitely caught the big fish of that day too.
It's got another one on the creek chub.
Biggest chub in the bucket.
Yeah,
I feel
we got
privileged
it.
to have it.
Oh, good hit.
He's out to sea?
He's going out to sea, guys.
Uh-oh.
It sure acts like a big walleye, guys.
Sweet, that's what we want to hear.
Sure acts like it.
Go ahead. Grab
Yeah,
it.
buddy.
Ah, there we go.
Woo!
Woo! Absolute
That
beast.
is a tank.
That's what.
Sometimes in order to catch big walleyes, you have to be willing to get a little cold. So yeah, kind of like in the springtime for pre-spawn fish, a similar situation occurs in the fall, in the sense that fishing in some of the nastiest, coldest weather can catch you some of the biggest fish of your life. And they're starting to come up shallower again. So when we were talking about the dog days of summer stuff, those fish are feeding out in 40, 50, 60 feet of water a lot of times. Now in the fall, post lake turnover, a lot of those bait fish are coming back up into normal depths of water, 5, 10, 15, 20 feet. So those bigger fish are coming up to follow them. So it's just another time where you have a better opportunity to be around a lot of bigger fish, which increases your chances. The window can be very small because after lake turnover, it might not be that long before there's ice on the water. And it may be really cold and nasty out there and you may not want to go fishing and you may not have a lot of good opportunities to do it. But if you can make it out there during that time, you're greatly improving your odds because you're just going to be around that many more big fish. And the last day that I went out solo this year, November 4th, I did end up catching my biggest Lake Sakakawea fish of the season. Big hookup on the jigging Rap. Big hookup. Could be snagged, could be a pike. Definitely feels heavy, but again, whoa. When you get a snagged fish, things can feel heavy. I'm guessing that fish to be in about 15 feet of water from where I was pitching. Boy, my forearm's already tired. I saw the white tip of the tail, folks. It is in fact a pretty large walleye. I hope it's hooked really good. I hope it's hooked really good. Woo! It was hooked really good. First fish of the day is an absolute stud. 27 1/4. That's what I love about fall fishing. Good hard fight, girl. Thank you for your hospitality. You're free to go when you're ready. See ya. That's fall. So basically, as you watch this video, you can kind of put together some of these patterns where timing makes a big difference. I think bigger fish certainly have certain bite windows. The other thing is presentation. A lot of times bigger baits do equal bigger fish. Sometimes more aggressive baits will catch bigger fish. So if you're pulling live bait rigs, spinners, bottom bouncers through an area, you're catching a lot of littler fish. Crankbaits might catch bigger fish. Jigging Raps might catch bigger fish. Also the way that you present it. Sometimes the bigger fish want things going slower than the little fish, and sometimes they want them going faster, and if they're really in a hungry mood, they have the ability to outrun those little fish and grab a bait before they do if they want it bad enough. The other thing that I think is very important for bigger fish that I think a lot of the fish that I caught on these spots is they typically want to be adjacent to deep water, in my experience. So even if you're fishing shallow areas, it's nice to have steep breaks nearby. So they might be fishing or they might be roaming a big flat, but at some point there could be deeper water in the area. That especially holds true later in the fall. They want access to be able to move up and down onto those flats pretty quickly. In the spring, they may not have to be quite as close to that deep water, but it's nice to have deep water around, especially for bigger fish. And also, I find a lot of times the big fish will be doing different things than the smaller fish are. That especially holds true, like Devil's Lake is, to me, notorious for that, where you can be in a certain spot and no matter what you throw or what you pull, you're gonna catch eater-sized fish. Or you could be in a certain area catching all kinds of fish with a certain thing and you're only catching little fish, and then once you change your presentation, you'll catch bigger fish. So the bigger fish are usually on a different pattern. They're almost kind of a different species sometimes. A lot of times I will find big walleyes crazy shallower than the rest of the walleyes in the system or crazy deeper than the rest of the walleyes. For example, like early midsummer, early July, you might find tons of fish in 10 feet of water, 15, let's call it 15 to 18 feet of water. And every once in a while you'll find a big fish up in 5 feet of water chasing different bait, or you'll already find a big fish out in 35 feet of water chasing those deep smelt and ciscos and things like that. So if you're on a pattern where you're catching a lot of small fish and your goal is to catch big fish, you gotta change something. You're catching fish, but it might not be the thing to do to catch the bigger fish. So change locations, look deeper, look shallower, use bigger baits, use a more aggressive bait, use a slower bait. Maybe if you're catching little fish on spinners, throwing slip mobbers and just dangling leeches or minnows in a big fish's face will get them to go. Creek chub rigging is a great example where that creek chub's not moving a lot, but it's a big bait that has a lot of action on the spot that gets their attention, and it's a very easy meal. It's a very big, meaty, fatty, oily meal. And you just gotta put in the time a lot of times with big fish. There aren't as many big fish as there are small fish. It's gonna take time. You're gonna have to weed through some things. It's gonna be fewer bites per day scenario. Like tournament fishermen, they're always talking about, we just want our 5 bites a day. We just going for 5 bites because they want all their bites to be big fish. It can be a more monotonous and slow and painful style of fishing, but if that's what you're after, that might be how you have to do it. So be willing to think differently to get different results. If you did find this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button to say so. Think about subscribing to the channel, and if you wanted to support further, you can do so on Patreon. There's a lot of perks on Patreon, a lot of insider information, fishing reports for the Lake Sakakawea area if you're a person that fishes the Lake Sakakawea area. I'm grateful for all the current patrons, and I'm grateful for anybody who signs up in the future. Other ways you can support this channel if you want to do so is you can buy some merch, you can buy a book. I'd appreciate it if you bought a book. Other than that, good luck catching some big walleyes the next time you go out, and we'll see you later, fisher people. Gotta warm up your corn chips. Quit screwing around, all right? Walleye fishing is serious. Yeah. Big walleyes, we're catching big walleyes. Big walleyes, how do you catch big walleyes? Big walleyes. Big walleyes. How do you catch big walleyes? How do you catch big walleyes? Leave a comment below. And that's all, folks.